today for a webinar entitled Hometown Hope for Children in Foster Care, How You Can Help, hosted by One Accord for Kids. There are approximately 300 children in foster care from the Permian Basin. Each of those children needs a home, and in some cases, community members in the Permian Basin have stepped up and have provided a home for one of those children. However, many of our children in this area have to leave because there is a lack of foster care homes and other places for children in the system in the Permian Basin. About 90% of kids have to leave their hometown. And of course, I grew up in a little town. That was a big deal, having to leave my hometown. Whenever I went off to college, it was hard enough. And imagine if you're a 6-year-old and you have to leave Seminole or Andrews and go somewhere else. And tragically, over 60% of the children who can't stay with their parents in the Permian Basin have to leave West Texas. And that is often hundreds of miles from their home, hundreds of miles from their school, and from their families and other people. So again, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming to this informational session called Hometown Hope for Children in Foster Care, How You Can Help. Our goal here is to demonstrate to you the need and offer you the opportunity to think about how you could possibly serve children in foster care. So I'm going to discuss sort of the timeline of a child entering care, and then we're going to follow that timeline roughly with the panelists. So a child or a sibling set, a group of siblings, is removed from home because Child Protective Services is investigating their family. We tend to think of Child Protective Services being involved with families because of physical abuse or maybe sexual abuse. But the truth of the matter is that over 70% of the children who come into the state's care, into the care of Child Protective Services, come in because of neglectful supervision. That's kind of a catch-all category. For our purposes, it mainly means in this area that their parents are testing, one or both of their parents are testing positive for drugs, often methamphetamines. We do have a rehabilitative system of child welfare in Texas. The goal is for children to have a safe place to stay, a caring place to stay while their parents rectify whatever makes the home unsafe. And the purpose is to get children back with their parents. Sometimes, and I would say even oftentimes, that can't happen, and we have to look for alternatives. Sometimes those alternatives come through relatives. But another way that children can leave the system and find a permanent place with someone other than their parents and their family is through adoption. And we'll talk about adoption today. Every child who enters our foster care system is also involved in a legal case. And so there's a judge who's monitoring the case. And each child in our CPS system, Child Protective Services system, gets a legal advocate. And that's my background. My background is as a legal advocate for children. But they also get a community advocate. And in our area, the community advocate in the Midland area anyway is CASA of West Texas. CASA takes volunteers to serve as community advocates for children in the foster care system. So at this time, I'd like to ask Patty to discuss a little bit about CASA and what CASA does. Take it away, Patty.
Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate it. CASA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocates. So what we do is we recruit, train, and support volunteers from the community who advocate for children in court. We are not a child placing agency, so our volunteers do not take the children home with them, but they are their advocate throughout the course of their legal case. So through their entire time in foster care, we advocate for what's in their best interest. So we follow and ensure that their educational needs are met, their physical needs, their medical needs, and all of those things are met while they're in foster care. We are also a voice for the children in court, and so our volunteers provide very important information to the judges regarding how the child is doing, what their needs are, and what they feel is best with regards to what you were referring to earlier as a permanent home. So what is the best permanent home for that child? So they make recommendations to the judge in that regards as well, always keeping in mind what's in their best interest. Our hope is always that they will return to their families. That is our goal, and we hope to support the parents in that way as well. But as you mentioned before, they could be placed with relatives, and we want to provide support or resources to those relatives as well. And also any families that come forward, and we definitely need more foster families in the area and adoptive families. So we try to support them and provide them with as much as we can with regards to resources as well.
Thank you, Patty. And thank you for the work that CASA does. As a legal advocate, it was really nice to have a CASA on my case. And so I definitely appreciate the work that you guys do. So we've discussed a little bit about the placement needs for children and the need for foster homes in our area. The need really is for families that will consider taking a child into their home temporarily and potentially serving as a permanent home for that child if they can't return to their family. And so that's the role of our child placing agencies. We have 2 child placing agencies on our panel today. One is High Sky Children's Ranch and the other is Buckner International. As a legal advocate for children, I really saw some of the damage that was done to children whenever they couldn't find a foster home in their area. I remember representing a teenage girl who was being raised by a single father, and he was just struggling with some of her mental health needs and her behaviors, and wasn't able to cope with that appropriately. And she needed a safe place to stay for a while, but we couldn't find a safe place locally. And she ended up down in the Houston area. And unfortunately, some of these residential centers have been known as trafficking, magnets for sex traffickers. And she was recruited out of that residential treatment center onto the streets of Houston and went from being a teenager that had never been very far from West Texas to someone who was really victimized on the streets of Houston. And so really the call here is for you to consider how you can serve kids, and ultimately, fostering isn't right for everyone, but we certainly need more people who are willing to open their home and then also willing to support people who open their homes to children in our foster care system. So Kelsey Jones is with High Sky Children's Ranch. They license foster homes and also foster to adopt homes. And so Kelsey, could you tell us a little bit about High Sky and the work you do there?
Absolutely. Thank you, Brandon. My name is Kelsey Jones, and I'm with High Sky Children's Ranch. We're located in Midland. Our mission is to heal child abuse and promote family wholeness. And we fulfill that mission through a variety of different programs. So we have a prevention and early intervention program called Stay Together, where we try to provide families with support on the front end so that maybe they won't enter the system or they won't remain in the system for very long. We also provide aftercare services for youth who are aging out of foster care. We have an emergency shelter on our campus that provides temporary shelter and care for children who a foster home may not be able to be located for them. And then specifically the program that I represent is the foster care and adoption program. And so we are a child placing agency, and we license foster to adopt, and adoptive homes in our community. And that means Midland, Odessa, and the surrounding areas. And so within about a 90-mile radius, we license homes. That means that we license families or individuals to provide foster care in their residence. But we also have homes on our campus at High Sky where families from the community can come and reside and provide foster care in that home. So, you know, our mission to heal child abuse and promote family wholeness, we want to promote family wholeness, whether that's through reunification with the biological family. So we offer therapeutic services to support families around circling around the child. So that starts with the biological family, that includes the foster family, and then potentially the adoptive family. And we're also promoting family wholeness through adoption, should that become a need for that child.
Thank you, Kelsey. And Buckner International actually does something very similar, and they're another local agency licensing foster homes and adoptive homes in our area. And we have Jennifer Bernal, who's the foster care supervisor, to talk a little bit about Buckner, and we will let her discuss what she does and, you know, discuss if it's any different than High Sky.
Yes, thank you, Brandon. So my name is Jennifer Bernal. I'm the supervisor for the foster care and adoption program. And our mission is similar to High Sky. We set the standard of excellence in serving vulnerable children, families, and our seniors. And so here in Midland, locally, we do serve our foster care, and we have our foster to adopt program. We license foster homes, foster to adopt, and we also license adopt only homes. And so with our foster care program, we service the area within 130 miles. And so we try and service as many families as we can locally. And so by doing so, we train our potential families through a course over a month, and have them prepared to have those tools to take care of our kids that are entering care while waiting for reunification of their family. And so with that program, in addition to our Waiting Texas program, we have that program specifically for families who are adopt-only motivated. And so we match families according to their family profile, and we work really closely with the department to make sure we're able to match that child and that family appropriately. And so those are our two programs that we have here locally in Midland, and we strive our excellence to serve every family and every child with a 5-star customer service experience. And so we're really excited to have families that are willing to open their hearts to this specific population that we're all here to serve.
Thank you, Jennifer. And that's so important to match the right child with the right family, which is why we need actually more families than we have children. So we're not just looking for a home or a bed for a child, but we're looking for the right home and the right bed for the child, both temporarily and potentially in the future. We've talked a little bit about, in this conference, we've talked a little bit about adoption, and really highlighted the foster piece. And, you know, fostering is one way to potentially adopt. So you'll take a child into your home. The goal is reunification, but if reunification isn't successful, then you have the opportunity, you know, if it's appropriate, to consider adopting that particular child. However, it's also possible to adopt without fostering. And Addie's Hope is a local adoption agency that sort of specializes in the population of kids that sort of haven't found the right match through the fostering system. to adopt them, and so they are essentially languishing in the system and really need someone to step up. And these can be kids who have jumped placements, have multiple placements, and they could be kids who maybe perhaps are older and are considered by some to be less adoptable. However, they are no less in need of our help. We have, our foster care population, really, it's not accurate to say that it's predominantly infants and early elementary kids. We have, about half of our kids are in the middle school or early middle school to teenager age. And so that's a population that Addie's Hope has done a really good job in finding forever homes for. And so Jamie's going to tell us a little bit about the heart that Addie's Hope has.
Thank you, Brandon. I'm Jamie Poe. I am the program director for Addie's Hope here in the West Texas area. We do offer services to families within about a 90-mile radius of our Midland office, and that's just because we want to be able to support you and support you well. And so our heart really at Addie's Hope is to work with our older child population to get them into permanent homes and permanent placements with families. And we believe that every child deserves a family, and we know that children that age out of the foster care system versus children that are placed into a home when they become adults, there's just a much better prognosis in life in general for them. We know that kids need a support system, and we know that for kids to be successful, they need that as early in life as possible, but especially once they are 18 and figuring out a job in college and all of those things. So our main program is called They Wait. It is designed to place kids that are a minimum of 6 years of age or older out of the foster care system into adoptive homes. We are adopt only. We do not foster first. There's quite a process to go through with matched adoption, and I will not give you all the details of that because it would take way more than our allotted time to explain all of that, but that is our primary program. We do place children that are younger. They're often attached to an older sibling. So it really is an older child program. If you know that you really want a child that's 2 or under, fostering is absolutely your best option. If you're open to older kids, open to our teenagers, and you can handle that, then we certainly want to work with you. And our goal is for you to be successful from placement and beyond. We want to support you once the adoption's finalized. We want to support you in getting there, and we provide all your training. So if you know that you have a heart to adopt and you don't want to foster first, then we would be an option for you. We also work with kinship families that currently have their relatives placed with them or a fictive relative placed with them that need an adoptive home study so that they can adopt. We work with them as well.
Thank you, Jamie. If y'all missed the figure before, Jamie was talking about 6 years old and older, and that's 55% of our kids in foster care from the Permian Basin are age 6 or older, and those are the ones who predominantly make up those figures of more than 60% of our kids leaving West Texas, going to San Antonio, going to Dallas, going to Houston is 6 and over. And so, if you have a heart to work with kids who aren't babies still, but they would fit into your family nicely, we will have an opportunity at the end of this webinar to send a survey and connect you with any of the panelists that are on the panel today and figure out the right place for you. Again, fostering and adoption isn't right for every family, but at the same time, there is a role for everyone. And our job as professionals is to find that role for you and to connect you with the need of the kids from the Permian Basin. So I mentioned that Matt Waller is on the panel. Matt Waller fostered and adopted through our state child protective services system. Matt, could you tell us a little bit about your experience as a foster dad, as an adoptive dad, and then we'll talk about sort of what you've gone on to do since you adopted.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you all and the panel for jumping on, and also for what you do. Yeah, my name is Matt Waller. I came and moved to Midland, Odessa, to work at a school, Midland Classical Academy, as a teacher, and for a long time, long before that, my wife and I had been into the fostering game. We were having some trouble just with fertility, and went to an information meeting to learn more about foster and adoption and growing our family that way. One of the things they said to us is they said, and I can only get it backed up through Blue Sunday, a child abuse prevention website, where they said that something like 90% of all the kids that graduate from the system, right? 90%, no, I'm sorry, it's 66%. 66% of all the kids that graduate from the system will wind up in 1 year on the streets, in jail, or dead. And that just kind of shocked me that 2/3 of all the kids going out would, and I think it's nationwide, would actually have that kind of outcome. And it just lends me to think that, gosh, they need a family. They need a forever family. Jen and I looked at each other and said, this is something we need to do. We need to jump in and become foster parents. We need to sit down and do this. And so we kept going with the paperwork. In one of the trainings, and it might have been that same one, they talked about a family that was that she had gone out. Our trainer had gone out to visit the family. A new child, our child had been just placed with a family, and excuse me, and the little boy came running up to her, right, and said, tugging on her skirt, saying, "We love it here." And this is the new foster home. So, well, why do you love it here? She says, because here we eat every day. And it broke my heart. And the child runs off, and it comes back later on. You know what else I love? Is that every night they give us a bath and read us a story. And really, we were hooked then. Where Jen and I looked at each other and said, we're doing that every day. We had one little girl at the time, and we said we're doing that every day, and we feel like we have room at our table, right? We have room in the bathtub for another kiddo, and so we realized we had room in our hearts to take care of this terrible need that we had there. We moved here. We fostered a handful of kiddos coming in. We decided that we would stick with birth order. We fostered a boy who was out of San Antonio. We lived in San Antonio, and fostered him long enough that and got to be we now get to be his forever home. I'm real excited, of course, to do that. He's just the sweetest little boy. And then we moved here to Midland, got involved in the fostering scene, and realized, gosh, there wasn't a lot of resources in that, and the community has to lean on each other for that, the fostering community and the churches. We have had a number of foster kiddos come through our home, and just recently have had to close our home because we actually have my wife's pregnant, and that'll be our 6th child in the home, and that's our number. That's where the state says you can have no more kiddos. So we've stopped fostering and because of that purpose, but fortunately got to do a lot of good along the way too. That's kind of our story.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, and thank you, Matt, for that story. I mean, by and large, our kids come from very chaotic home life, from just parents who aren't particularly doing well at all aspects of life. And of course, their most important aspect of life is parenting, and they're not doing well at that either. And we'd like to get them back to a point where they are, but to have a place either in the short term or the long term where they have structure, where these kids have the right and and we have the responsibility and the pleasure of giving them a structured home life. That's our goal. And so you stopped fostering whenever you sort of maxed out your home. And what have you gone on to do since you stopped that?
Yeah, good question. So we got into the game here. It's kind of my saying for it, is getting into the game here. And we had a kiddo come into our home, and my wife said to me, "Hey, can you run up to the attic to go grab a car seat?" So I run up and grab a car seat, come down. She says, "No, it's not that one. There's another one up there. Can you get it?" And so I go grab it and come back down. And I'm coming back down, and I know there's no more car seats up there. My wife says, she looks at it and says, "No, there should be another one up there. We've got a bigger kiddo coming." And I said, "Darling, unless you're thinking about a different attic, we don't have it." And so it kind of sparked an idea in my wife's mind, who she created this kind of repository, or this kind of holding space for things for fellow foster families called the attic. Ironically, nothing ever went into our attic. It all went into our garage, and then storage units, and now out at Fostering Restoration. But we kind of saw that there's a need for just to have to help each other out, and then we particularly saw the need for churches to jump in. And so now we're out to empower and equip the church and her people to engage in the prevention, intervention, emancipation of local orphans. So we want to engage churches in the work that's being done here, and kind of see where churches are in what they're doing and how they're serving, and engage them and get them into the fostering game from here. So we've done that recently through babysitting, as well as just getting things out to folks.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for making that shift or that pivot from sort of directly serving children in your home to serving those who serve. And the church component is so important in this work. The church has a mandate to take care of these children. It's very specific in the Bible, and the church has and continues to step up. I will tell you that the church is not enough. The need is greater than the church, and it's really a community need, and churches are building blocks for our community. But I think it's unfair to sort of make this a province of the church rather than the work of the community. And so that's really our heart at One Accord for Kids. One Accord for Kids, our mission is transforming lives by strengthening families and connecting communities. And it's really about bringing the strength and power of a community into what's going on with the state-run foster care system. We consider ourselves a community hub for foster care. We strive to coordinate and to support those in the work in our community, and to facilitate community collaboration to improve our system. I've mentioned briefly that my history was as an attorney, legal advocate for children in the foster care system. And what really broke my heart was the damage that the system causes to children that's on top of the damage that they've suffered in their homes. And that is through no fault of anyone in the system. Everyone in the system is, it's just sweating blood, trying to get these kids everything they need and do their best. And that is true for workers in the state child protective services arena, as well as the staff and employees of the panelists and their agencies. But the truth of the matter is that families are best for children, and children deserve a family and not a system. And when children can't have their family, the next best thing is to have a community of caring people to take care of them. And so really, we at One Accord for Kids are trying to deinstitutionalize foster care. We are trying to make this a community movement to support and serve children who can't stay safely in their home. These are our kids. These are kids who we want to grow up here, who we want to be productive members of the Permian Basin, to get good jobs, to sit next to us in the pews on Sunday. And that's our goal, is to work with those who work directly with children to support them. So we've talked a lot, and each of the agencies on this call certainly represent a way that you can serve. You could become a CASA volunteer that Patty talked about. You could become a foster parent, an adoptive parent, like Buckner and High Sky mentioned. If you don't want to foster, if you just want to adopt, Addie's Hope can help you with that. If you want to serve through donations, if you want to get your church involved, Matt at the Attic is a good contact for that. But there is a role for everybody. There's a role for making casseroles, to welcome, for families to welcome someone into their home. There's a role for working with your church small group or your community organization to get involved, to work on homes, relative homes that are just not quite up to the state standards for taking care of kids. We can go out there and we can hammer some nails and make that home sufficient. So our heart is just to give you the seed that will lead you into this work. And I'll tell you, I started out in life as an insurance defense lawyer, and I worked for insurance companies, and I thought I was going to be a wealthy attorney. And I accidentally ended up representing a child in the foster care system. And once it gets a hold of you, you can't get rid of it. And so I know that that's the case for you. If you are on this call, if you're on this webinar, that you've got a seed, and we would like to see that seed grow. And you'll have the opportunity through this process to connect with us and have us connect with you to answer your questions. But we are going to ask some questions of our panelists and have them answer those questions. I'd like to kind of do that roughly in the order. I don't want to be too structured on this, so the panelists can feel free to jump in if they need to say something. But I'll start with Patty. Patty, you kind of mentioned that CASA of West Texas is not a child placing agency. Could you talk a little bit about how CASA is different, how a volunteer is different than a foster parent, what's different about those roles and responsibilities?
Absolutely. Thank you, Brandon. Basically, what happens is when a child does enter the foster care system, the judge will appoint a CASA volunteer to advocate for that child. The CASA volunteer actually makes an assessment on how that child's doing even prior to the first hearing in the case, which is the adversary hearing. Basically, their role is to develop a relationship with the child, get to know the child, also get to know all the family members that are involved in the case. They get to know who the parents are and those types of things. Basically, that's when we get appointed. So that's really when our role, or our CASA volunteers role, begins, is at the appointment of a case. But to become a volunteer, we go through a process, an application process. So we have our application on our website. Once those are completed, then we conduct an in-person interview, and then individuals go through 30 hours of training. And basically it's a time, the training is a time for us to decide if this is a good fit, because just like being a foster parent or being an adoptive parent, this is not for everyone. There is a role that everybody can play in order to improve the system. But it's an assessment process for everyone. So we go through that process in that 30 hours. As of right now, our 30-hour trainings are being offered via Zoom because of COVID. But once someone is trained, then that's when they can be appointed to the case. So we have highly trained volunteers. Each volunteer has a volunteer supervisor who supervises them throughout the course of the case. The case can last for a year to a year and a half, sometimes longer. A volunteer is appointed to a case, and so there may be multiple children on that case if a sibling group is removed from their home. So that volunteer would actually advocate for the entire sibling group. But like I mentioned before, our volunteers do not take the children home. So in that way, it is different. We aren't parenting the children. We are their advocate. We tend to be the most consistent person in their life throughout the course of the case, because unfortunately, Child Protective Service workers will, leave. Sometimes they are moved from one placement to the next for various reasons, just depending on the situation. Or, and you talked about children being placed out of the area. We still serve our children. If they were removed from our 7-county service area, we continue to be their advocate even when they aren't placed in this area. That does make it difficult for our volunteers as well, but they manage to work through it and continue those connections with those kids. So having more placements closer to home benefits everyone. It benefits the kids so they can stay closer to their families. It benefits CASA as well. I mean, it keeps our volunteers engaged in keeping kids closer to home is, what everybody is hoping for. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it did, Patty. We have a question from the attendees here about the weekly time commitment. How much time does it take out of your day or week or month to be a CASA volunteer?
That's a great question. So it tends to take about 5 to 10 hours a month. So it just depends on the case. We have a lot of volunteers who work 40 hours a week, and they are able to manage a case. If we do try to match cases with volunteers, but just like, you were mentioning earlier with matching foster families with children, we want to have more than enough so that we can make a good match. But if somebody works 40 hours a week and we have a sibling group of, 6 that comes in, we wouldn't appoint that to somebody who has a fairly busy work schedule. We do have some volunteers who are retired, and so they would have a little more time to commit to a case like that. So we do try to match people according to their time constraints and things of that nature. But on average, it's 5 to 10 hours a month.
All right, thanks, Patty. There's another question about, what type of person makes a good CASA volunteer? What are you looking for?
That's another great question. So we need somebody who likes to be a squeaky wheel, to be quite honest. That's usually our best advocate, is somebody who's willing to say, hey, this isn't right, this isn't good for this child. And they're willing to basically take a stand for those kids. In my opinion, that's our best advocate. It's somebody who's going to fight for that child and for what is in their best interest. They're going to fight for those siblings. And I don't mean, unprofessionally. It's not what I'm referring to, but in a professional way, just to be able to say, this is what this child wants, and it's also what's best for them, and things like that. There are a lot of voices in the courtroom, and that's a good thing. There need to be multiple people with multiple voices. There's a voice for the parents. There's also an attorney ad litem for the child who advocates for what they want. But there also is a guardian ad litem, which is the CASA volunteer, who advocates for what's best. So, we need somebody who's vocal, who's willing to take a stand, and who's committed. We want somebody to stay committed on the case. So, and for that child for that reason, because it offers them that consistency that they really are lacking and that they desperately need. So, in my opinion, That's the best advocate. Man, woman, you know, we don't care. We just want somebody who's willing to take a stand for these kids.
Thanks, Patty. I called CASA Volunteers the advocates for the community. They're really the voice of the community. Lawyers have a role, but it is not that. It's more of a legal role. It's a I's and T's kind of thing. And we, of course, the judge is also a voice of the community, but a judge can only make a decision, and the best decision based on the information that's brought to him or her. And so that's the role that I saw whenever I was an advocate, is CASA tended to bring some of the best, most updated information to court hearings so the judges could make the best decision at the time. All right, thank you, CASA. So Kelsey, High Sky, we've talked a little bit about how the system could need some improvement. And that's sort of one of the reasons we're here, is to improve our local foster care system. But if it's broken, why should people stick their hands up and become foster parents?
Thanks, Brandon. I think that if you have ever known anyone who has fostered or adopted or has been involved with the child welfare system, you've probably heard that it's a broken system. And I'm not here to affirm or deny that. I won't deny that the system is without its flaws. But I think that when we indict the system as being broken, it's important that we acknowledge why the system exists in the first place. The system was born out of brokenness, out of flaws, because of the brokenness and flaws in humanity. And those who created the system and those who carry out the work of the system, we're human, and we all carry our own imperfections, and we all carry our own flaws and brokenness. So if the system is born of brokenness, it's not going to be without some flaws in its execution. But that doesn't mean that we don't strive and advocate for change that's going to mend some of those broken pieces. But if we're not willing to step into that brokenness, then we will not be menders of the system. We will not be menders of families, of children, or of hearts. And if that's what we're called to do, we have to be willing to step into that brokenness and to embrace it, and to do some hard work. No one is ever called to do easy work. We're called to do hard work. I was reading a blog of a foster parent the other day, and they made the statement that fostering is hard but good. It's the easiest and hardest thing I'll ever do. And I think that rings very true, because there are very, very hard days. And sometimes there are more hard days than good days. And sometimes that good can only be glimpsed. And if you blink, you will miss it. So if you're called to bring light to darkness, if you're called to mend hearts and give hope, it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be redemptive. It will change you, it will stretch you, but more importantly, it will change the lives of children and families who wouldn't otherwise have had a chance, because not everyone is willing and able to accept and embrace that brokenness.
Well, Kelsey, if the call had an amen corner, I would be standing up now. That was preach it was kind of the hashtag for that, and I couldn't agree with you more. And I'll point out that those glimpses of breakthrough and redemption that we see with families and children, they almost erase many of those difficult moments. They're so valuable, and they're so fulfilling to see a kid, served well and loved. Matt talked about the kid who said, I eat here, and I have a bedtime routine here. And I'm getting chill bumps right now just thinking about, how transformative that is for kids to have those moments. So we do have another question from the attendees about bio parents. Talking about brokenness, I guess, a little bit is, what's it like to see bio parents? How do you interact? How does a foster family interact with bio parents? Is there animosity, I guess, is the question. And that was to you, Kelsey.
Okay. I think it's different in every case. And so I can't really make a blanket statement about what it's like to work with biological parents, because it's going to look different in every situation. What I will say is that, again, it's not going to be easy. But I think that when you step into this work, you have to be willing to open yourself up and be vulnerable. Part of offering hope and healing to children in foster care is extending that to their biological family, because the goal is family reunification. And so we have to model that care and compassion in the way that we interact with and hold those biological parents in esteem. So will you have contact with biological parents of the children in your home? Yes, you will. That's going to look different in every case. And again, it's going to be hard, but it is redemptive. You can not only change children's lives when you step into the world of foster care, but you can change families' lives. You can be a part of breaking the cycle of trauma and abuse. So again, it's redemptive work if you're willing to step into it.
Thanks, Kelsey. That's grace, and that's what we're called to do, is grant grace. And it's sometimes tough. These families don't look like a lot of families that we interact with, and so there's this gap between what we think a family ought to be doing for their children and what we know has gone on in the home. So. But it's a moment to stretch, as you indicated. Jennifer with Buckner, I have some questions here about, foster parents having their own biological kids and how that works. Like, can they share a room with foster children? And, how do you kind of, I guess, protect your family from the system that we've talked about being flawed and bringing a child into your home?
That's another great question, Brandon. So we do have that question come across when we are speaking with in-process families, and their concerns with their children, or if there's enough room in their home for additional children, maybe more than just one that they originally have inquired about. And so you can definitely have your children, your foster children, share a bedroom with a biological child of yours or children, but there are some protocols that we do require through our minimum standards that we follow. And so you can have children stay in the same bedroom as long as your foster child has their own separate bed that is off of the floor, and their own mattress that has the mattress cover. That way they're protected in their own bed, and there's not any issues of crossing boundaries. And so we do require that from families if you're going to have a foster child and a biological child share a bedroom. And so it's not against the rules to share bedrooms, but we do require that they have their own separate bed, and as long as they have, each foster child has 40 square feet of free space that they have to play and to have of their own, so they're not crammed in one room. And so there also are age requirements. So when a child reaches 6 years old, then if they are of the opposite gender, they have to have their separate room. And so if we have a 4-year-old girl sharing a room with a biological child who is 5, then it's fine. But if we have a foster child who initially was placed in your home that was 5 years old, and their 6th birthday just happened, then that foster child will now have to have their own bedroom that is separate from the boys' bedroom. And so, again, that is put in place to protect your family, to protect your biological children, and to protect our foster children as well. And we also have the question of, well, can a foster child stay in my bedroom as a foster parent? Absolutely, as long as the child is not over 3 years old. As soon as that child has their 3rd birthday, then they have to have their own bedroom separate from your bedroom. Whether that looks like a crib, you can have the crib in your room. Again, they have to have that 40 square foot of free space available to them, a place to put their clothes, a dresser, if you have an extra closet in that room of yours. That way there is some separation of your foster child and your personal belongings. And you can definitely have a toddler bed in your bedroom as well. Again, it has to be off the floor, the mattress covering, and their own bed as well. And so it's not anything that is against being a foster parent, but we do have those rules set aside to be protective of your family and our foster children.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. There's this concept of normalcy for children in foster care, and we want them to have the most normal experience. And so a lot of the things that you would do for your own family, we want you to do for children who you've invited into your home. Unfortunately, there are rules. This is a system. There's court oversight, and because of that, there are some policy implications that you have to navigate, and that's kind of a part of being a foster parent. Your agency helps you navigate some of these rules, like 3, they have to leave your room. 6, they have to be in a room with someone of the same gender. So that's the role of your agency, and they'll help you with that. You don't have to worry about that. That's their function. But at the same time, there is some degree of navigating the system. And again, I would love to see this system be deinstitutionalized, where we could just do what we know is right for kids. And sort of when the rules don't make sense, we don't have to follow them. That's just not the system we have right now. But we're working to get there. And that's the important part of having the system be driven by the community, by community norms and values. And so the way we do that is we just have more people from the community involved. We kind of deprofessionalize this, and the system reflects the community and not the system. Jamie, there's some questions about adopt only. So how would someone sort of find out more information about the differences between what Addie's Hope does and what a couple of the other agencies have highlighted? And sort of how do you prepare a family for the adoptive experience? Jamie, you're on mute. I don't know if we've lost you. All right, we will go over to Matt then. Matt, there's a great question here from the group about someone who this is imminent. They're going to be licensed, and they're going to be having the opportunity to serve kids in this way. And I think this question is a good one for you, which is, what do you wish you would have known when you were at the stage that this person is at, that you know now?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I actually, some of the panelists will see I started typing answers, and even Jamie chimed in as well. So the question was, my husband and I should be licensed to foster, to adopt in about a month. What do you wish you would have known when you were in this stage? So, I think there's a lot of, it's one of those things. Fostering is one of those things. Once you jump in, you really start understanding what it all means and what it actually looks like. Going to because they use all the acronyms. We're trying not to use them, but what does it actually look like to go to a family group conference or things like that. And so ultimately, though, I guess Jamie's response was, hey, be patient. The right one's coming. The right one for your family's coming your way. But then I would echo a lot of what, Kelsey said, and is the system is messy, right? And so just like any kind of situation, when as you're getting to know somebody and there's a messiness involved, it's going to take time to learn each other, as well as to learn how to operate within that time. So though it might feel messy, and with that messiness comes a level of chaos, right? But you have to lean on the professionals that are in the Zoom call to say, okay, how do we make more sense of what's going on? How can that help me? And then also lean on the fostering adoptive community. You can call up the attic as well. Just, how do we actually navigate these things? But ultimately understand that there takes a level of learning, a learning curve to figure out, okay, what all happens here? Because a buddy of mine tried to do an algorithm one time of what it looks like for a kid in foster care, and it was like really crazy, because if these little nuances change, then you're going to go here. And so there's so many parts to it. So I'd say maintain flexibility. Know that you just have to be ready to help and ready to step in. It's going to feel like you're in a position that you won't be appreciated, but you're greatly appreciated. When you go to court, the judges actually thank you for what you're doing, and they just give a sincere thanks, as well as the caseworkers, and even and I was going to chime in on this too. Even the biological parents, it's you get a little nervous. You're kind of nervous about seeing this person for the first time, but when you see them, what totally has every time diffused my emotions is that hug that I get from them, and a thank you that says, thanks for taking care of my kiddo. And so I would say it's worth it. Whatever kind of confusions that might come up or difficulties that come up, it's going to be well worth those frustrations.
Great, Matt. That's really good information. We don't have time to go back to Jamie, but because I want to be respectful of everyone's time, she did want to point out, Matt talked about, having a maximum number of kids in a home of 6. That's relevant to those of us with large families, but that whenever you just do straight adoptions, like Addie's Hope specializes in, that's not a limit for the adopt-only process. So if you've got a large family and you want to add to it, we will connect you right with Addie's Hope. Again, I want to be respectful of your time. It's 1 o'clock, and I want to thank all the panelists for their time. Some really good information, some information that, the conversation doesn't stop here, but this is a really good starting point. And I'll tell the attendees, the conversation with you, I hope, doesn't stop here. You'll have the opportunity to fill out a short survey so that we can reconnect with you and share information. If you are on Facebook, that survey will be posted to our Facebook page, so you can answer that survey there, and we'll keep your information just within this group. It won't go to anybody other than the panelists as appropriate. And I want to thank you for the time commitment that you gave us today to tell you a little bit about what we do and about how you can join us. And man, there's enough to do for everybody. We want to transform. We want to start a community movement here in the Permian Basin, and that starts with you. And so I just ask you to stay connected with us, with anyone on this panel, and we will help you and shepherd you through this process. Again, thank you to all the panelists, and we will be in touch soon.